Coming up on In the Loop, is the U.S. doing enough to fight climate change? As President Biden gets ready to travel to one of the biggest global climate conferences of the year, we look at what other countries are saying about America's efforts. Plus, could we be making progress against misinformation online? We explore how social media platforms were able to step up their fact-checking in this election cycle. This is In the Loop. I'm Cody Lagrow in for Christian Bryant. We'll have plenty more on both of those stories, and we've got a ton of other great reporting packed into today's edition of In the Loop. But first, let's start today with a story that's still creating challenges for families across the country: the baby formula shortage. Baby formula is easier to find in most parts of the country than it was back in the spring, but the shortage is not completely over. In some regions of the country, parents in search of baby formula in their local store are still finding empty shelves, and not every brand has been able to get back up to 100% just yet, which can have huge consequences for parents who rely on specific formulas to keep their babies healthy. Data from late October released by market research firm IRI Worldwide found that 87% of store shelves had baby formula back in stock. That's near the level from before the shortage and well above the low of 69% from near the peak of the shortage in the summer. But just because it's on the shelves does not mean it's easy to find everywhere. A U.S. Census Bureau survey found that the shortage still looks fairly dire for many parents. Their data showed that nearly a third of families with infant children reported they had trouble obtaining it in September, and nearly 1 in 5 households has less than a week of formula at home. As a reminder, the formula shortage was an issue tied to the long-running global supply chain crisis. But it spiked in February after a voluntary recall by the formula manufacturer, Abbott. They were responding to 4 reports of a dangerous bacteria parents found in formula produced at their Michigan plant. Abbott produces 43% of formula in the U.S., and the Michigan plant where it stalled production is the company's largest producer. The market for formula in the U.S. is pretty concentrated too, with 90% of formula being made by just 4 companies. Families in need have an even slimmer selection, as the USDA's Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC for short, gives out contracts to 1 company per state. Nearly half of the 1.2 million babies receiving WIC help had to rely on Abbott for their formula. The federal government enacted several short-term solutions that have helped improve the flow of baby formula. In addition to working with Abbott to reopen production at their facility, the White House allowed for baby formula to be flown in from other countries, and Congress passed a law loosening restrictions on what companies the WIC program has to rely on in order to help them get around the shortage. But a lot of those actions were taken to provide short-term solutions. Congress actively realized there wasn't time or bipartisan willingness to pass more comprehensive, long-term solutions. So what can be done to make sure a shortage like this does not happen again? We're bringing in someone who has worked on answering just that. Joining us now is Alyssa Rosenberg. She's a columnist for the Washington Post opinion section. She focuses on culture, parenting, and gender. And she wrote a 3-part series examining the baby formula shortage. Alyssa, first of all, thank you for joining us. What solutions do you see as necessary to preventing the formula pipeline from breaking down and making sure parents have access to safe formula for their children?
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me and for asking. And second, I hope you have a lot of time, because this is a story that is about parents, is about what children deserve, but it's also a story about the complexity of the American economy. There are sort of 2 key aspects to this story. Baby formula is a very concentrated market, and so you need to address that market concentration. But it's also a product that's highly regulated, and justly so, right? I mean, if you or I have a bad leaf of lettuce in a sandwich, we're not going to feel great. We might never go back to that deli again, but we're not going to get life-threateningly ill because we eat and drink a lot of things over the course of a day. On the other hand, if you're a baby and all you consume is formula from a single tainted tin of formula, the contamination can build up over time and make you very sick. This shortage starts at a plant in Sturgis, Michigan. And it's a really useful way to talk about what we need to do to make the system better. Because first off, that plant produces about 20% of the formula that's made in the United States. And it produces 100% of certain kinds of formula that are critically important for children with what are called errors of metabolism, serious allergies. Their bodies can't get the nutrients out of or even necessarily digest your standard, cow's milk protein based formula. And so they need these products. There is no world in which 20% of any kind of formula should be produced in a single factory. And there's absolutely no universe in which 100% of a certain critical brand should be produced in one place. And so you need a more diversified manufacturing operation for these companies. You also probably need more formula brands in the country. And one of the things the Biden administration did during the worst of the baby formula crisis was the Food and Drug Administration used what's called enforcement discretion to say that companies that were manufacturing formula from overseas could essentially get into the US on an expedited basis. And the FDA has actually taken steps to make sure that those companies can stay here on a permanent basis. And third, you probably just need more startups in the US. And this is a very expensive product to develop. Not only do you have to come up with a recipe and get it certified, you have to do a study to make sure that babies who are fed it grow adequately when they're eating the formula. And if you want to start your own factory, that is just very expensive and time consuming.
Is the solution just kind of lying with the Biden administration? Can Congress do additional work to ensure there's an adequate supply in this country?
Absolutely. And we've actually seen some of that work happening. Congress has passed tariff exemptions on some of the base ingredients that are coming into the U.S. Rosa DeLauro, who is the chairwoman of the House Appropriations Committee, has been working on this really hard, has introduced one significant bill in the spring, is working on another targeting domestic supply issues here. And the agencies have a role to play too, right? Elise Stefanik, who has a lot of dairy farmers in her district and so is very interested in baby formula, has introduced another good bill that has a whole package of proposals for how to change the way the FDA regulates baby formula and allows in new entrants. And so, the agencies have a role to play too. One of the things Stefanik's bill would do is require the FDA, if it's going to do a recall of baby formula, to take backfilling that supply into consideration.
It was wild watching my friends who are parents on Instagram, even just updating on their stories of like, there's formula here. I grabbed some, let me know if you need it. So how much more competitive is the market set to become in the next few years? And how might that prevent another shortage?
I mean, I think hopefully a lot. Aussie Bubs has inked deals with a bunch of retailers to, be in their stores permanently. They started out, I think, in Target and Kroger, and they're going to be in Walmart and Whole Foods as well. So you're starting to see these companies broker long-term deals. So I think we'll see a lot more brands. And I think the first ones we'll see will be from overseas. But I would not be surprised if we see some more startups in coming years. And that's a great thing. I have talked to folks who are running formula finding groups that have thousands of members where people are still trying to source formula for each other. We're still not back at 100%. And, those families need shelves that aren't empty and they need more options. And I'm actually, for all I've been frustrated and angry while reporting these columns over the last 6 months, I'm also hopeful that things are going to be different and hopefully different permanently.
I mean, just sitting here, you've inspired my Shark Tank of a brain to maybe come up with the baby formula recipe. So I vow to give you 10% if I follow through with that.
I will take your 10%, but I also will expect that I will not be getting it for about 5 years down the line, and that's if you can get in the queue with Perrigo. So.
Exactly. A lot of work to be done, but thank you so much for shedding a light on it, Alyssa. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
We're always glad to get some expertise from someone like Alyssa, so thanks to her again for joining us to break this all down. Up next, we'll be turning to a few other big stories we've been keeping tabs on, including the latest dangers from the deli counter and updates on the landfall of Hurricane Nicole.